It's interesting that she mentioned that I've been here since 2007 as a lecturer. I can always tell when a new school year begins because my bio now says, for more than 25 years, he has been in higher, for more than, it used to be a small number, and the challenge about teaching at a college or university is that every year freshmen are 18, and you're one more year further away from that. I am delighted for the conversation we are about to have, and I am humbled as I know more about the Jaedicke Award. In fact, they were going to take it away. I said, no, let it sit out here for my talk. And it sometimes is called the golden apple? The silver apple. So I want to get apples to put in my silver bowl, but I didn't have time to do that on the break that we had. When I think of 2007 and when I came to the GSB, it was a really remarkable thing that the GSB did to create a slot for a faculty member in communication. I had been at the NYU Stern School of Business where I earned my MBA. Shortly after finishing my MBA, I was appointed to the faculty, not a pathway very many MBA students aspire to, but it was the one that I wanted. And I taught at Stern from 2002 when I graduated until 2007 when Stanford whisked me away. But Stanford hadn't had a slot on the faculty for a communications professor since Mary Munter left in 1983. And so there had been a 24-year period with no credit-bearing classes in communication at the GSB until in redesigning the curriculum for the fall of 2007, they created the critical and analytical thinking course, and that had a very heavy writing component, and so they created a communications slot to support that course and create a team of coaches. But it was really evident to me somewhere in my second week on the job, I was in the faculty room and I was trying to operate the copier and figure out what the code was to put in. And Jeff Pfeffer, most all of us know Jeff Pfeffer, in his inimitable fashion came into the copier room and he's like, who are you? I don't know you. And I said, well, I'm J.D. Schramm. I just joined the faculty. He goes, oh, you're Mary Munter's replacement. 24 years. I don't know that we would really call that a replacement. But it was a great thing, both for me personally and professionally, that Stanford made the choice to open that slot and that I could step into that. I often say that I have the privilege of teaching at a school that I'm not sure I could get into. And there's a little bit of self-deprecation in that, but there also is, it is an awesome privilege to get to work with students and alumni from the GSB. And every new quarter, I am reminded of that. And what I hope to share with you in the next hour that we have together is what some of that awesome privilege feels like and looks like. And I'm also going to bring into the conversation some of my students and former students so that you can have a little bit of the experience that I get to have every day. And it's fascinating to me that not only do I get to be in the classroom, but I get to interact with alumni. My most recent alumni event was in the living room of Win Chesson in New York City. He had a gathering of LGBTQ alumni in New York City that I got to be the guest for just a few months ago. And my next alumni event is the last Tuesday in October. I'm going to be in Singapore. My husband and I are doing some consulting, and the night before the consulting begins, Ifan and some of the Singapore alumni have put together an event. And so those are rich opportunities for me. And now I get to have it with hundreds of you all at one time. So let's get rolling, shall we? I titled this talk, Communicate with Mastery, Speak with Conviction, and Write for Impact. And that really is the heart of what I have taught here at the GSB since 2007. And I can't give you all of that in an hour, but I can give you a taste of it as well as some homework, as well as some resources that you can use to build your own mastery as a leader who communicates. I will, near the end, take time for questions, and so if you've got questions that bubble up inside, I'll indicate where's a great time to ask that. And I just ask that you wait for the mics to come around so that for the live stream audience, hello everybody out on live stream. My son is at the DMV watching us right now, so hey Toby, good to see you. Get your car registered, you're illegal right now. And for the recording, we want to be sure that we capture that. And with that, here's the agenda. Here's what I'd like to look at. In preparing for this honor and this talk, I looked at what has made, not me, but what has made us successful at the GSB in the last 12 years around teaching communication. Why had we gone through such a period of time where we didn't offer it in the curriculum, and now where it is one of the most sought-after electives, probably behind touchy-feely and designed for extreme affordability, we are up there in terms of waiting lists and being sought out. So what are the 7 secrets to Stanford's success since '07? I love alliteration. And then I will move out of the 7 secrets and give you some 4 very practical steps that you can take based on the information that I'm sharing with you, and then close with some gifts, some resources that I'd like to guide you to as we look at this. I teach this formula in my classes. The finance professors are not amazed at the nuance of my formulas here, but I really believe that communication is leadership, and by the transitive property, leadership is communication. The senior leaders that I work with at the university and outside the university, when they have a communication issue, it usually is a leadership issue. And when they have a leadership issue, it usually is a communication issue. The two are very closely tied to each other, and yet communication is a distinct discipline. How do I write? How do I speak? How do I stand in front of a group of people and have presence? How do I send an email to an individual or have a phone call with one person and accomplish what I want to accomplish in that? And so I see that the two are very intertwined with each other. Now I have one more formula that I'll give you before we get out of the finance world and into the communication world, and that is I want to remind you what an asymptote is. Now an asymptote is a curve that gets closer and closer and closer and closer to the line, but never crosses the line. If this were to go up in infinity all the way to forever, that blue line would never cross that black line, but it would keep getting closer and closer and closer to it. Dan Pink, in his awesome book, Drive, talks about mastery as getting better and better at something that matters. Better and better at something that matters. For me, that's communication. For other people, that might be golf, or that might be cooking, or that might be parenting. But it's something that you never are going to get to perfection. You never are going to get to perfection. Every speech you give could always be just a little bit better. My MBA students and MSX students this morning, we sat and for 20 minutes critiqued Oprah Winfrey and her Golden Globes acceptance speech, which I think is a phenomenal speech, and even Oprah could have done better. And my MBA and MSX students knew, and they could figure out where it was a little inauthentic or where it was just a little bit rough and wasn't as smooth. So all of us, anything we write, anything we speak, can always incrementally make that better. And we just know that we do that without ever hitting perfection. It's not possible to do the perfect speech. Although I'm going to do the best I can, it won't be perfect. There's already things that I could have improved. So then let's look at the 7 secrets of Stanford's success since '07. First, invite great people to collaborate. Invite great people to collaborate. I was tasked with, in the fall of '07, hiring at first a team of writing coaches who would work with the MBA students in the CAT course that was being launched. Because there was so much writing involved in the course, the faculty wanted to be sure that the students were supported and were writing effectively. And so we first put a team of writing coaches together. And then in the next year, we began to add other lecturers to the faculty and other coaches to the coaching body and what we do. We still, go back one here, we still have a very rich tradition of communication coaching since '07. Every incoming MBA and MSX student is assigned a professional communication coach to work with them for their entire first quarter. No other business school has replicated this since we launched this in 2007. And they work with them on how to write, how to speak, and how to participate in class. Oh, it was phenomenal. I know at times the MSX students are like given second class or back row sort of things. It was so awesome. Our communication coach worked with the MSX students on class participation this summer. That coach happens to be my co-instructor, and we walked in on the first day of class, and I started class discussion. All of the participation came from the MSX students. I was like, could I hear from an MBA student? Can just one of you raise your hand and enter the conversation? And it was both the culture of MBA 2s wanting to lay back a little bit. They were just off of their summer, we'll call it internships. But it was very evident that the MSX students had been primed for participation in a way that the MBA students had not yet. And so this year, we actually have a team of 7 coaches, very diverse group of professionals who do communication coaching for a living, and they take a cut in pay and a hit in their practice to spend the fall quarter with our students, working with them intensely. But we knew that it wasn't just being able to coach students effectively, we also needed to be able to have credit-bearing courses that the students would engage rigorously with faculty members around what we were doing. So in the fall of '07, I was a sole practitioner. There I am. I actually looked sadder in 2007. I tried to find my old bio pictures, but they weren't easily available on Google at midnight last night when I was finishing my slides. But since the fall of 2007, so in the spring of 2007, before I was hired, there was exactly 0 communication courses offered at the GSB. This fall, there are over 22 sections of communication taught by a variety of lecturers. We added Matt Abrahams, who was honored with this award last year. I'll talk about his book in a moment. David Demarest, former communication director in the first President Bush's White House. Glenn Craman, who is a former managing editor at the New York Times. Raymond Nasser, who is the communication coach to Eric Schmidt and has been a part of teaching the course Eric teaches. Allison Kluger, a former television producer. Bert Alper, who is an entrepreneur with a branding background. Kirsten Hansen, who works here in the Valley with a number of startup companies and established companies. And Stephanie Soler, a GSB grad. So we have now 9 of us teaching communication courses and co-teaching communication courses. And we're all lecturers, but we're offering a lot of opportunities for students in the classroom to get better at writing, speaking, and participating. And our tenured colleagues have followed suit, and I counted 20 different sections of classes offered by tenured faculty that relate to communication, including Deb Gruenfeld's Acting with Power, Christian Wheeler's The Improvisational Manager, and a number of other classes that are communication related. So I think we've really upped our game. And we were talking in the dean's presentation earlier about how do you measure success. I think our success is measured by our alumni who are out there in the field more effective at writing, speaking, and leading because they're good communicators. These are just some of the titles of communication courses that we now offer here at the GSB. Now, I'm always a little hesitant when I talk with a group of alumni because you look at that list and you're like, we didn't have that when I was here. But we recognize that you are able to experience this as you come back to campus. So hopefully we'll give you a taste of this. So the first thing is invite great people to collaborate with you. The second is to use effective frameworks. And I'm going to give you now the first frameworks of this afternoon's class. It is, we can't just teach skills. Like there is a public speaking class at the engineering school. It has been there for decades. Maybe some of you even took it. It's an awesome skills-based class in public speaking. But we're teaching leadership communication, so we need to have research frameworks as well as the practical application. So the first framework that I begin almost every class and anything that I do is the AIM framework, developed by Lynn Russell when she was at the Columbia Business School and Mary Munter after she left here and went to the Tuck Business School at Dartmouth. Anytime you are going to write or speak to a group of people, slow down and ask yourself, what's my aim? Who is my audience? What do I know about them? What are their expectations? What is their culture? Do whatever you can to understand your audience before you write or speak. And then, 2, clarify what your intent is. What's your purpose, your objective, your goal? The question I like to ask my students is, as a result of this conversation, you want the audience to think or say or do what? Want the audience to do what? If you can't answer that, you're not clear on your intent, you shouldn't be writing or speaking. Don't waste our time with that phone call. Don't hold that meeting unless you know what your intent is. A few years ago, I was working with the CEO of Stanford's hospital. We were prepping a town hall meeting that he was going to deliver to his staff. And I stopped him about halfway through. I'm like, Dan, what's your intent? He said, well, I want to impress them. I said, well, great. It's all about you. What do you want the audience to think, Sarah? Oh, I want them to be impressed. I'm like, great. That's still all about you. As a result of the town hall, what do you want them to do differently? He goes, oh, I want them to treat patients with dignity. I'm like, yeah. Now we're in the world of intent. And if you as a leader can't specify what you want people to do at the bottom of the email or at the end of the phone message or at the end of the meeting, don't deliver that communication until you are clear about it. I had the chance this year to speak at a conference that one of our alumni invited me to, the Qualtrics Summit in Salt Lake City. And Oprah Winfrey, Barack Obama, and me. Okay, they were headliners, and I was like in a breakout room, but that's the way I remember the story, is sandwiched in between Oprah and Barack. But I got to hear Oprah's talk at Qualtrics, and she talked about intent in a way that I haven't heard other people describe it. She told the story of early in her career, she was doing a show, and the show was about infidelity. She had a man who had been unfaithful to his wife. He was going to be on the show. His wife was going to be on the show, and his girlfriend was going to be on the show. And the girlfriend had decided this was the best time to tell the wife that she was expecting. I'm like, is this Oprah or is this Jerry Springer? Like, which show are we describing here? And Oprah said, no woman, regardless of her relationship to infidelity, no woman needs to learn that on national television and not on my show. What is our intent in putting this on the air? And she said at that moment, not only could they not define the intent of that show, she said for the rest of her career, nothing went on the air that she and her whole production team didn't agree, what is our intention with the audience? That if we don't have that, we don't do this show. And it worked out well for her, and it will work out well for us as leaders if we clarify that intent first. Once you know A and I, you can get to M. You can then decide how I'm going to structure the message, what language am I going to use, am I going to tell a story, am I going to use slides, am I going to use a video clip. Then you can get to what the message is, but slow yourself down and define who's the audience and what's the intent. The biggest mistake leaders make today is they jump immediately to the message they want to share without considering who needs to hear it and what action should they take because of that. So this framework, the AIM framework, so wished I'd have developed it, but I use it with great citation and honor to Mary Munter and Lynn Russell, but it's one of the simplest ways to think about communication strategy. But we not only use great frameworks, we do also steal good frameworks. That is, in academia, that's called using effective citations. There is a framework that Daniel Diermeyer at the, I believe now is the provost at University of Chicago. In his book, Reputation Rules, that we use in our reputation management class, he has a framework for teaching leaders how to handle crisis communication. His framework looks something like this, that when a company is going through a crisis, there are 4 things that we expect of that leader. We want that leader to display empathy, transparency, expertise, and commitment. And in his book, chapter after chapter, he uses this trust radar, and the greater footprint that the radar has, the greater trust that company embodies. Now, I also I get to talk about this story with people who remember the stories that I'm going to share with you. But the classic example he gives of this is the Tylenol crisis in the fall of 1982. In In the fall of 1982, there were 11 people who died taking Tylenol, and Tylenol did not know, the makers of Tylenol, Johnson & Johnson, did not know where the problem was. Was it at the source? Was it at the manufacturing plant? Was it distribution? Was it at the store? And while they were doing this research, they did a worldwide recall of Tylenol. I mean, think for a minute. Those of us who were alive in the fall of 1982, like everywhere that sells Tylenol, you got to get those bottles back off the shelf. So Diermeyer, in his analysis of it, rated them this way. Very high on commitment, empathy, and transparency. The only place he rated them low was expertise, because nobody knew how to do that big of a wide-scale withdrawal of a product from the market. So successful was Tylenol in this that within 5 years, they were introducing new products to the market, and the commercial on TV said, "From the makers of Tylenol." That is a remarkable recovery from a disaster, because they displayed those 4 items. Now, he compared that to Exxon Valdez. You could fill in any oil crisis, like this could be BP Horizon, this could be, there's a number of oil crises we could put up there. Low on commitment, expertise, commitment, empathy, and transparency. The only thing they got scored for is they knew how to clean up their mess, slowly. But I love that framework for crisis communication and reputation management. So I stole the framework, and I just got his permission a few weeks ago. So I stole the framework, but changed the language as I started working with LGBTQ leaders in our summer institute for LGBTQ senior leaders who are on their way to the C-suite. We do a week-long experience for them. And I started working with that group, and I took his framework, and I said, okay, what is it that somebody who's a leader that's been marginalized because they're gay or transgender or lesbian, and I started from a blank canvas of authenticity. It is important as leaders that we display authenticity. Joel Peterson says in the first day of class that authenticity is such an important skill for GSB students that if you don't have it, you need to be able to fake it. And so authenticity is the first place that we start from. I'm sorry, that was really unkind. That wasn't Joel Peterson, that was Irv Grossbach. But anyway, one of the 2 great lecturers. But we start from a canvas of authenticity, and then I looked at, again, the guy who loves alliteration, clarity, confidence, competence, and connection. So as a leader who has been marginalized in other parts of my life or other parts of the company, other parts of the organization, other parts of society, I need to step in authentically to be clear, to be confident, to be competent, and to be connected. Now, in the full workshop that I do on this for the senior leaders who come to campus and the organizations I've gone out to deliver this at, often somebody says, that's not limited to the gays. Like, that would work for all of us. And I acknowledge it would actually work for all of us, but there is a unique challenge to somebody who is a minority in an organization, or the first woman who has worked in this organization, or the first elected official who is transgender. There's a different sort of expectation when you are stepping into something that nobody else has done before. And so, again, the greater real estate that I can have, I call this the lavender diamond, the greater real estate that I can have, the greater sense of leadership presence and authenticity that I exhibit. And I may have to do trade-offs. I may have to trade, if I'm new in a job, I may not have the competence, so I may have to over-index on connection. And so we begin to look at those 4 and what are the levers that move those 4 forward. The 4th key to our success is cultivating a storytelling culture. As you can tell already, I love telling stories, I love hearing stories, I love listening to stories. I got to do storytelling coaching with the last few reunion classes, and I love the expression that I think came from the class of '68, that they loved hearing the stories at reunion after reunion after reunion. They said, you know what? The older we get, the better we were. I like that thought. And so what do we do to cultivate a storytelling culture here? Well, first of all, we teach what a great story is. I love this illustration of the arc of a well-told story. This is based on Nancy Duarte's work, who I'll talk a little bit more about in resources. And she based it on Freytag, who was a dramaturge in the late 1800s. This is the 5-act structure of a tragedy. Hopefully the stories we're telling in our businesses and our startups and our lives are not tragedies, but it works. The one alteration I would make to it is I don't think we need nearly as much exposition as we think we do. I don't think we have to give as much background before we jump into a story, and I actually teach parachuting in to the story. But there's got to be some conflict, some inciting moment, then a rising action that leads to some sort of climax, a falling action, and some sort of resolution. If I tell you a story about jumping in a cab, going to the airport, and catching my flight, who cares? Like, there's no story there. But if I miss the cab, or I'm late for the flight, or I fight with somebody at TSA, then I've got the conflict. I've got something that started there. The other thing I like about this particular model, you notice that the line on resolution is higher than the line where we begin. It's the idea that when a hero goes through a journey, when he or she has that experience that they share back out with us in a story, that they should be transformed in some way or another. And if you think of, if you look at Star Trek and Luke Skywalker, if you look, Star Wars and Luke Skywalker, if you look at Indiana Jones, if you look at Moana, any of the great heroes in film and in literature, they all are better on the other side, and the world is better on the other side. You're familiar with the mantra we now use at the business school: change lives, change organizations, change the world. I was at MIT Sloan a few years ago, and I was working on my research for my dissertation, and they have a very similar mantra, except they use a different verb. They say improve lives. I'm like, oh yeah, we just change them. Their idea is that it should be better on the other end. We just make it different on the other end. But getting to know the basic structure of a story as I tell a story is an important skill for our leaders to have. And so think of that as you're telling your stories this weekend at Reunion. And let me give you an example of a story in a moment here. I love this line from one of our guest speakers who comes in, James Buckhouse. He talks about, it's not just the story I tell or the story that you hear. It's a story that you then repeat. It is in that power of having people repeat my stories, retransmit my stories, that I am more effective as a leader. So I'm going to retransmit a story for you now from one of my students, actually up here on the stage 2 years ago, Rachel Wallach. Rachel was in a program I'll tell you a little more about in a moment called Low Keynotes. It's kind of our version of TED Talks here at the GSB. And I'm going to fast forward to near the end of her talk. But I want you to look at how beautifully she tells the story of her experiences with healthcare providers.
So I was 8 years old, lying on the optometrist's black leather couch. After reading the last lines of tiny little letters, Mr. Robinson got up off his chair and he looked over me, saying, "Rachel, you need to wear glasses." Well, I jumped off the chair, I ran into the store, and I started trying on frame after frame after frame. I was elated. And I have never felt more glamorous than I did back then, aged 8 years old, admiring my reflection with my brand new hot pink plastic glasses. 10 years later, I was also lying down. This time it was a hospital bed. This time was different. Again, a doctor got up and he leaned over me. This time he paused before saying, "Rachel, you're going to need to use a wheelchair." But this time there were no choice of frames. Physiotherapist ordered my wheelchair. And the first time I saw myself sitting in it, I didn't recognize myself. But are glasses and wheelchairs really so different? It's not just perceptions of how I look, it's also perceptions of who I am. I'm going to let you into a little secret. People often tell me I am inspirational because I use a wheelchair, yet I backpack around the world. I use a wheelchair, yet I have a job. I use a wheelchair, yet I drive a car. back when I was just a glasses wearer, no one ever told me I inspired them. But why can't we see people who wear their wheels like people who wear glasses?
Why can't we view people who wear their wheels like people who wear glasses? This talk, which I use in my teaching often, this talk has forever changed my experience of people in wheelchairs. I'm running through an airport, like on my way to catch a flight, and I see somebody in a wheelchair. I think hot pink glasses. Like it has shifted my experience of that. Rachel has gone on to found a startup called, her talk is called Disrupt Disability. She's gone on to found a startup called Wheelwear. And what Wheelwear is custom wheelchairs that are based on the person's size and activity level and desires in life. And she's doing it with lessons that she got here at the GSB. And it's fascinating to see what she has done. And I love that a part of that journey was a 9-minute talk here on this stage at Stanford. Stories carry meaning, and stories give us power as leaders. So the fifth strategy that's a part of our success is we've really embraced the TED movement. Now, I'll acknowledge right at the beginning, not every talk is a TED talk. You know, if you walk into an investment committee meeting and you're like, I'm going to tell you a story about, no, you're going to look at some projections on Excel. But because TED is so widespread and so open source, we have really learned a lot about great presentations and great communication from the TED stage. We have done simulcasts of TED here to the campus. We have had TED speakers on their way to TED or their way from TED come and deliver their talks for our students. We've had students who've spoken at TEDx, and we've really began to see that this is a part of our culture and part of the conversation about great communication. We ended up creating a program here at the GSB called Low Keynotes, again, taking lives, organizations, and the world, that's the LOW in our title. We created Low Keynotes as an extracurricular. It's not a course that students take. They apply to get into it, and then they spend most of the winter quarter preparing a 9-minute talk, half of a TED talk, with one of the professional communication coaches that we deploy. Students report spending anywhere from 20 to 90 hours on this one 9-minute talk, but it's a talk about something that matters to them, how they're going to step out from here and change lives, change organizations, change the world. And I believe they're going to do it. It gives me hope as I look at each year 30 more students working on their low keynote talk. Rachel was one example of a low keynote talk. I'm going to give you another one in a moment here. But not only have the students done talks in a classroom or here on the CMEX stage, but they've gone on to, I think we've got 6 op-ed pieces in the New York Times and the Washington Post that are based on a low keynote talk. We have one student that BET Television approached her to do a television special. There's students who've launched startups. They become a part of that person's digital reputation. And it all is sourced in what they do here. So for this part, I'm going to show you, I showed you the middle of Rachel's talk. I'm going to show you the beginning and end of another talk. This is Caroline Clark, and I want you to see how she started her talk, and then we'll look also at how she ended it.
When I was 2 years old, my parents noticed that I was not speaking. Quickly thereafter, the doctors diagnosed me as deaf. For the next 12 years of my life, I learned to speak. I spent many Sunday afternoons with my mother on the bedroom carpet, and she'd teach me words. We call these sessions words. And basically, we would sit there and she would teach me words, and I would never forget the story that my mother told me about the first word I learned. It was the word up. She held me in her arms, and she carried me up and down the stairs. And she said to me, Caroline, we're going up. Up we go. Up. All my mom's friends and family thought she was crazy, taking on this grand project. but I watched her say the word up. I see how she opened and closed her mouth. Up, and close with a pop. Finally, she would take my hand and she would place it on her throat, and I'd feel through the vibrations what kind of sound she was trying to make. Finally, at the age of 2.5, I said the word back to her, up. When my mom heard these words, she was so overjoyed. She cried tears of happiness. I asked her, why did you teach me to speak instead of teaching me sign language? And she said, Caroline, it's because I wanted you to connect with anyone in this world. I wanted you to introduce yourself and say hello. I wanted you to stand in front of an audience and express yourself and your ideas. Not a day goes by that I'm not grateful for her teaching how to speak. The ability to connect with anyone is such a privilege. I'm able to connect with anyone I can. And through the process of learning how to speak, I've grown to learn about the power of the word. I'm going to share a few short stories with you about the power of the word.
And then, about 6 minutes later, here's how she ended her low keynote.
You measure life through words. Words are like seeds. When we say them, they float through the air. They can remain a seed, or they can grow into something beautiful. Words can distance, or they can connect. Words can harm, or they can heal. And words can transform lives, like they have done for me. All of you, as you go through this life, think about how we use the power of the word to connect, inspire, and to lift up. Thank you.
I like to let that play that you begin to see the standing ovation that her peers gave her at the end of that talk. In a minute, I know some of you are taking photos of slides. I'll give you a URL that you can go to the playlist. Also, so we've got nearly 200 talks up online from this program, and we do the talks in person here on campus the first week of March 2nd through 6th. So if you're in the area, be in touch with us. We would love to have you see some of the talks in person. The sixth step, directly related to this, is leveraging YouTube. Now, there are many social media platforms, but I want to talk about the way YouTube has made our leaders communicate more effectively. One is through low keynotes. Like the students the stakes are high because they know this could be seen by, and is seen by the world. So we've got the low keynote talks that are up there. We started low keynotes in 2012, and as of last night, we have 3,422,000 views of these students' talks from a 9-minute talk in a classroom at the GSB. The lives that they're touching, the impact that they're making, the difference that they're having because of what we can do with social media technology is amazing. In addition to the individual talks, I also have a program inside of my strategic communication class where the students do a final presentation at the end of class. They do a team presentation, and it's on a communication topic of their choice. And if the talks are good enough and all 4 students sign a release form, we also put those talks up. And we've got 5.3 million views. Together, between these 2 programs, we have almost 9 million views of student work here at the GSB. And that second library of communication talks has great things in there, like how to deal with anxiety, how to use body language effectively, how to design PowerPoint slides, how to have difficult conversations. And so the power of what YouTube can do for our students is pretty remarkable. And so I'm going to give one last video clip and just give you a sense of the talks that are up there. Now this talk in particular, let's see if we're at here, make body language your superpower. I'm going to come out of full screen for a moment here just to give you a sense of, I wanted to be able to see the number of views. This talk is the single largest viewed in the library, and it is almost 3 million views of people who've watched this talk. They keep track. When Oprah did the view from the top speech here, her talk doesn't have as many views as their talk does. And they keep recording that. So I'm just going to show you the final speaker in that team presentation.
Colin and Matt described, we've been focusing on the body language of the speaker. But let's not forget, who's the real hero here? As we learned in our first week of class, it's not me, the speaker, it's you, the audience. But what happens when the audience doesn't realize that they are on this hero's journey? Have you ever seen an audience that looks like this? Have you ever been that audience? It's okay, we all have. Whether we're playing on our phones, falling asleep and nodding off, looking at the clock, and calculating, can we make an escape from this room? We've all done it. But the thing is, it's the speaker's responsibility to understand what's going on with their audience, and body language is a powerful way to assess that. As a speaker, we can be so focused on our own body language that we never even notice what the audience is doing. And it's important to change that. So I want to share 3 strategies for how you can engage with your audience better by developing more observational skills. So first of all, absolutely be using the gestures and body language tools that we've talked about today and over the course of the quarter. But the second thing is to notice. Of course, you're going to be looking for eye contact, but look beyond it. Look at how your audience members are sitting. Are they fidgeting? Are they moving? Are they leaning forward, looking engaged and taking notes? Or are they zoning out? If your body language, your eye contact, and your efforts at being compelling are not working, then you can go deeper. You can try to surprise the audience with a question or use some humor. Or you can disrupt the audience. As students, we hate being cold called, but we know it's effective, right? Jason, what's your favorite color? Okay, very good. You got that one. As we all know, it's the fastest way to re-engage with the conversation with the speaker, so don't be afraid to use it. It's so important to keep your audience on track because they're the hero and it's their journey. Remember how Nancy Duarte told us that we are the Yoda to the Luke Skywalker, and our job as the speaker is to keep the hero on their journey.
With that in mind, I think we've talked about 3 concepts that really remind each of us about how body language is your superpower. Use it, become that superpower, become that superhero, and we welcome any questions you have on how to stand strong, gesture effectively,
and pay attention to body language from the audience. I clipped it just a moment too soon. And the fact that I have these out there, I now assign them to students in class that they watch them ahead of time. They know what the bar is in terms of having one of their talks included in the YouTube library. And they are learning about the communication that they're teaching while they're teaching in a way that I've had companies use these in training. I have high school teachers reach out to me and say, what else is in the library? I use this one. I want to have other talks that are there. So it really has become an element of our success. And the 7th piece to our success is nurturing thought leaders. Now, I got to admit, Stephanie, I was a little bit subversive. I still list in my bio that I teach thought leadership at the GSB, even though the class was canceled 2 years ago, not because the students didn't want it, but the administration wasn't sure that 20-somethings, which is primarily our student body, could be thought leaders. It felt a little too aspirational. But I teach thought leadership, even though the class isn't offered anymore, in the work that I do with students. I'm just going to give you 3 quick examples of students in our 2020 class. Michael Saltzman, thought leader in fraud in insurance, and is doing a startup, has written articles, have been featured in magazines because of the stand that he has taken in this. Mike Lewis wrote a book before he was at the GSB, When to Jump If the Job You Have Isn't the Life You Want. And while he's been here at the GSB, he's been doing guest speaking on campus and beyond campus about the whole concept of going from one career field to a completely different career field. And then, just Friday, one of my students, the first talk that they do in class, it's a 2 to 3 minute talk about a leadership challenge. One student, Tammy Chen, posted her assignment on her own LinkedIn page and has 11,000 views, 105 comments, and a job offer because of her putting herself out there as a thought leader about what worked and didn't work in terms of advice she got from a CEO. The CEO she quoted is the one who did make a job offer to her, and it was good advice that she received. But being able to work with our current GSB students in the MSX and the MBA program and occasionally the PhD program when I get to, these are remarkable young adults who are thought leaders in their own right, and we find ways that we can capitalize on that. So those are the 7 secrets for Stanford's success since '07. It is not the work that I have done. I've been a catalyst for it. I stepped into an opportunity at the right time with the right leadership of the school, looking at wanting to build our skills in writing and in public speaking, and it has just evolved. It has just taken off. And you really need to not be jealous of what the students are getting today, but proud of what your institution is able to provide for each and every student in the program. So I promise you there would be some homework. 4 things that you can do in order to approach mastery. Now keep in mind, you're never going to get to perfection, but to approach mastery. First, watch some of the GSB videos on YouTube. I'll give you the URLs in just a moment. Great thing to bring into your organizations, great thing to share. Backstage, one of the other award winners was telling me that before she even knew what Low Keynotes was, somebody had forwarded her one of the Low Keynote talks, and that's how she learned of the program existing here. It's inspiring, it's motivating, it's educational. 2, embrace AIM in everything that you're going to communicate. Anytime you're going to write or speak to a group of people, professionally or personally, slow yourself down. Who's my audience? What's my intent? If I can't answer those 2 questions, don't go on to message until you get those, and then create a message that's going to inspire that audience to take that action that you want them to take. 3rd, you're back at school, at least for a weekend, commit yourself to personal mastery. What are the areas in your writing or your speaking or your use of social media or your participation in meetings that you know you could take some steps to improve? Incremental steps. Working with a coach, having an editor, going to a colleague and making a commitment to coach each other in how we're showing up in our communication as leaders. And 4th, be bold. Step into your own thought leadership. It has never been easier to do a blog, to do a TEDx talk, to put yourself out there into a specific community as a thought leader on a specific subject. Even if it's a subject you have not yet mastered, you know it's something you need to work on, choose a smaller community and step into thought leadership in that. My husband and I right now are co-teaching a class he's a minister, we're co-teaching a class at his church on financial management and budgeting for families. We don't do that real well, but we knew by teaching the class we would have to get better at it, and it has transformed our relationship to money and our relationship to budgeting because we said we will be the thought leaders for this group of 20 people on this particular topic. And we're maybe a chapter ahead of them, but we're leading them in the thought process and changing the legacy we're going to leave for our 3 kids because we're going to be better at it than we were. So step into thought leadership. So finally, I promise, perfect, where I wanted to be time-wise. I will have time for a few questions in a moment here. Let me talk about the resources that are out there to support you. First of all, this is the slide to get your cameras on if you want. These are the URLs that will get you to the 2 video libraries that I curate here at the GSB. And I invite you to spend some time looking at those 2 libraries. In addition to the videos that are out there, since I'm speaking to some people of generations that know there are these things called books. They're printed on paper, and people open them and read them. There are some books that I just think are exceptional for leadership communication. Denise Brousseau, who wrote the textbook on thought leadership, Ready to be a Thought Leader. She's a graduate of the GSB in 1993 and co-taught the class with me. One of our communication coaches, Chris Lipp, working with students in entrepreneurship, developed a book on pitching called The Startup Pitch. And then Matt Abrahams, who spoke here last year, Best title for a book, Speaking Up Without Freaking Out, 50 Strategies for Overcoming Anxiety. 3 great books that have come out of or are part of the program we do here. And then the 2 leaders that I see in the field right now, Nancy Duarte, who has several books out there, but I think her book, Resonate, is the best. We use that as the text in our class. And then The Credibility Code by Kara Alter. Great small text based on communication in Silicon Valley. So we've got a few minutes for questions before I close. Are there any questions I can answer? And if we can get the mic runners out. Any questions? Up here in the front in the blue plaid shirt. And she's right next to you with the mic.
Like maybe most of us, maybe all of us here, I love Stanford, and it's been a great opportunity. But you said something kind of shocking a few moments ago, which you may or may not recall, probably do, which was that they killed the course on thought leadership. And my thought is that must have happened out of fear. And that's not my experience of the leadership or the quality or the caliber of the school. So what the hell was going on?
I was being a little provocative in bringing that up, and I was hoping John Levin would still be here, but I'm sure he and I'll have a chat about what I chose to share. There is a challenge in academia in terms of a limited number of slots, limited number of classrooms that we can teach, and decisions get made about which classes to offer by a small group of faculty who are looking at a number of issues. This was a course I really hated to see us lose. And even though we lost the slot for the class, I've looked for other ways that I can encourage thought leadership and keep the torch alive that this may be something we could reintroduce at some point in the future. It was also co-taught with an alumna, and I think the more alumna and women that we get in the classroom with us, the stronger that experience is. So I'm hoping that it will still come back. Another question on this side? I'm all that stands between them and more alcohol, right? Okay. One more question? Okay, final question.
So I'm a dinosaur 30 years ago, GSB, and we didn't have this amazing thing called PowerPoint then?
Yes.
So do you have any observations on whether the ways in which that either enhances or can interfere with effective communication? Because certainly, in my observation, it can become a crutch and so just interested in your thoughts there. Yes,
like any tool, it can be used effectively or ineffectively. Many of us have had the experience of death by PowerPoint, where there's just too many words, too many things going on, too many animations, and it's, again, goes back to the AIM model. Who's your audience? Why are you showing this, and where do you want to take them? Amanda Tucker and I had a conversation earlier about her team at Nike, and that it's very easy to just put a lot of data in front of people without using it to tell a story. And so looking at how do I use PowerPoint effectively to show you the thought process. I can do some stuff in PowerPoint that in the 1980s was not even possible, and I can also kill a class with really bad PowerPoint or kill a meeting with really bad PowerPoint. What I love to do at times when students are getting too much into their PowerPoint, I will just walk up to the keyboard and hit the letter B, take it to black, and say, no, keep going, you're fine. Or if it's a smaller room, I'll just close their laptop, say, no, go ahead, I want to hear what you have to say, so that they're in the conversation, not in the slides. I had an experience in here, the first time I did a talk in here, 4 of the low keynote students doing their final low keynote talk, and for some reason, on that day, that projector and that screen and that computer were not talking. And I had to go to 2 young men who'd worked on their talk since January, and this is now May. And I said, I don't know what we're doing. I don't think I can solve the slides. Can you present without slides today? They took like a half second. They looked at each other, smiled, looked back at me and said, you bet. We took the screen up and we had a great conversation. The 2 women who were on that stage that day weren't using PowerPoint, so it was no impact to them. Later, we edited the slides in when it went up on YouTube, but it didn't hurt their conversation because they knew their material well enough. So it's a tool we just have to use carefully and thoughtfully. So this is the part of the presentation where I show the resources that other people have out there and that I use in my classes. I am thrilled that for the first time I actually get to list my own book up there. This summer, I was able to take some time before starting my new job at Knight Hennessy and write a book called Communicate with Mastery. And I really am able to look at what we have done over the last 12 years at Stanford and provide a resource to people who haven't had the benefit of being in our classes. And I'm awed by Joel Peterson wrote the foreword to the book. John Levin wrote one of the testimonials on the back cover. And it really is allowing me to take what I've been doing in class and get to a wider audience. It'll be out in January from Wiley, but I am just delighted that I am able to step into my own thought leadership for something I've wanted to do for a very long period of time. And what I've shared with you today is really kind of an executive summary of what is there. And so with that, the last slide that I will offer is, let's keep the conversation going. I have loved the chance to be here and to be a part of Reunion Weekend. Can't stay this evening, so I've got to get home and pick up children from daycare and be dad tonight. And your reunion really needs to be about you and your classmates and the memories that you have. But I am happy to share what is going on in the classrooms here at GSB, in the Low Keynotes program, in the GSB Communication Lessons Collection, and who knows what innovations we're going to come up with in the next year with the team of coaches and faculty that we have committed to helping our students write and speak more powerfully. I began by saying you cannot perfect communication. You can get better and better and better. You can get closer and closer to it, but you're always approaching mastery. You're never at perfection. I'll close by saying you cannot not communicate. You can't. You cannot not communicate. No matter what you do, what you say, what you write, whether you reply to that email or you don't, whether you send that tweet or you hold off on that text, you cannot not communicate. Everything we do as leaders communicates something to someone somehow. So if you take on the principles we've talked about this afternoon, you will be more likely to have the message that's communicated be exactly what you wanted. Because you cannot not communicate, so let's own what we will communicate. And tell some great stories this weekend. Thank you. Thanks.